Ethan had once believed in dreams, the kind that came with plans, goals, and a future worth fighting for. But now, sitting on a damp park bench with his threadbare jacket pulled tight against the biting wind, those dreams felt like relics of another life. At 28, he was no longer the ambitious young man who graduated top of his class or the eager employee starting his first job. Instead, he was one of many faces blending into the gray backdrop of the city streets. It hadn't happened overnight. First came the layoffs after the company downsized, then the missed rent payments when savings ran dry. Friends tried to help at first, but pride, or maybe shame, kept Ethan from asking for more than they could give. Before long, he found himself alone, scavenging through trash bins behind restaurants and avoiding the judgmental stares of passers-by. One bitterly cold evening, as snowflakes began to fall, Ethan wandered aimlessly near a quiet park. His stomach growled relentlessly. It had been 2 days since his last meal. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, something caught his eye, a half-eaten sandwich lying on a bench. Someone must have left it behind, untouched except for a single bite missing from the corner. Ethan hesitated, staring at the sandwich as if it were both salvation and temptation. Then he heard a faint cough nearby. Turning, he saw an older man huddled under a thin blanket, his frail frame trembling against the chill. The man's hollow eyes locked onto the sandwich in Ethan's hands, and though he said nothing, the longing was unmistakable. For a moment, Ethan wrestled with himself. This was his find, the answer to his hunger. But something deeper stirred within him, a flicker of compassion that refused to be ignored. Clutching the sandwich tightly, he approached the man. "Here," Ethan said softly, holding it out. "You look like you need this more than I do." The man blinked in surprise, his weathered face softening with gratitude. "Thank you," he murmured, accepting the offering. As their eyes met briefly, Ethan noticed a spark of curiosity in the stranger's gaze, as if he recognized something familiar in Ethan's weary expression. Little did Ethan know, this simple act of kindness would set off a chain reaction neither of them could have anticipated. And the frail man, whose name was Victor, carried secrets and wisdom that would soon change Ethan's life forever. The next day, Ethan spotted the same frail man, Victor, near the park again, sitting on the same bench with a tattered blanket wrapped around his shoulders. This time, Victor greeted him with a faint smile. "You didn't have to give me that sandwich yesterday," he said, his voice gravelly but warm. "But I'm glad you did." Ethan shrugged awkwardly, unsure what to say. "It wasn't much. Besides, you looked like you needed it more than I did." Victor studied him for a moment, his sharp eyes seeming to see past the layers of dirt and exhaustion. "You're not from around here, are you? Not used to this life?" "No," Ethan admitted reluctantly. He hesitated before adding, "I lost my job, then my place. It all happened so fast." Victor nodded knowingly, as if he'd heard similar stories countless times. Life has a way of knocking us down when we least expect it. But even in the darkest moments, there's always a choice, to keep going or give up. Those words lingered in Ethan's mind long after their conversation ended. Over the following days, their paths crossed frequently. Victor began sharing bits of his own story. Once a successful doctor, he had walked away from his career after losing his family in a car accident years ago. Consumed by guilt and grief, he chose to live among those less fortunate, finding solace in simplicity. Despite his hardships, Victor carried an air of quiet dignity. He taught Ethan small but vital survival skills, how to stay warm during winter nights, which shelters served the best meals, and how to navigate the city's labyrinth of resources. More importantly, he listened. When Ethan spoke about his dreams of becoming a teacher before everything fell apart, Victor encouraged him to hold onto those aspirations. "You're stronger than you think," Victor told him one evening as they shared a meager meal from a nearby soup kitchen. "Don't let this life define you. You can still build something meaningful if you're willing to fight for it." Slowly, Ethan began to feel a flicker of hope reignite within him. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond the streets. Inspired by Victor's resilience, he started taking small steps toward change. He visited a local library, using the free internet access to update his resume and search for job openings. He also volunteered at the shelter where they often ate, helping serve meals and clean up afterward. Their bond deepened with each passing day. Ethan admired Victor's wisdom and unshakable spirit, while Victor saw potential in Ethan, a young man determined to rise above his circumstances. Though neither voiced it, they both recognized the profound impact they were having on each other's lives. One chilly morning, as they sat together under the pale light of dawn, Victor handed Ethan a worn paperback book. "Read this," he said simply. "It might remind you of who you are and who you can be." Ethan accepted the book gratefully, feeling a surge of determination. He didn't know it yet, but Victor's faith in him was about to lead to something extraordinary. And though challenges still lay ahead, Ethan no longer felt entirely alone. Despite his growing determination, Ethan's body couldn't keep up with the toll of life on the streets. Weeks of malnutrition, sleepless nights, and exposure to harsh weather finally caught up with him. One freezing morning, as snow blanketed the city, Ethan collapsed in an alleyway near the park. His vision blurred, his limbs heavy and unresponsive. He barely registered the sound of hurried footsteps approaching. "Ethan!" Victor's voice broke through the haze. The older man knelt beside him, his face etched with worry. "Stay with me," he urged, wrapping Ethan's trembling form in his blanket. "We need to get you help." Summoning what little strength he had left, Ethan tried to protest. "I'm fine. Just tired." "No, you're not," Victor said firmly. "You're coming with me." With surprising strength for someone his age, Victor helped Ethan to his feet and guided him toward a nearby clinic, a small, unassuming building where Victor once worked. Though retired, he still maintained connections there, and the staff recognized him immediately. "This is Ethan," Victor explained to the nurse at the front desk. "He needs medical attention now." As Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness, he overheard fragments of conversation between Victor and the doctors. They spoke of severe malnutrition, hypothermia, and exhaustion. He felt a pang of guilt. He'd been so focused on surviving that he hadn't realized how close he was to losing the fight altogether. Over the next few days, Ethan remained in the clinic under careful supervision. For the first time in months, he slept in a warm bed, ate regular meals, and received proper care. Victor visited daily, sitting by his bedside and sharing stories to lift his spirits. One afternoon, as Ethan regained some strength, Victor opened up about his own struggles. "After my family died, I blamed myself for years," he confessed, his voice tinged with sadness. "I thought I didn't deserve happiness, not after failing to save them, but helping others. It gave me purpose again. It reminded me that even in our darkest moments, we can still make a difference." Ethan listened intently, seeing parallels between Victor's journey and his own. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to start over," he admitted quietly. "What if I fail again?" Victor placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Failure isn't the end. It's part of the process. You've already proven your strength by surviving this long. Now it's time to take the next step." Inspired by Victor's words, Ethan resolved to turn his life around. With Victor's guidance, he began exploring resources available to him. A charity program offered temporary housing, and a local cafe hired him part-time to wash dishes. Though the work was humble, it gave him stability and hope. During one of their conversations, Ethan asked Victor why he'd gone out of his way to help him. Victor smiled faintly. "Because you reminded me of myself, a man who needed a second chance. And because your kindness that night, giving away your last meal, showed me that goodness still exists, even in the hardest times." By the time Ethan was discharged from the clinic, he felt like a new person, not just physically but emotionally. Victor had saved more than his life. He'd reignited his belief in the possibility of redemption. Little did Ethan realize, this was only the beginning of his transformation. With Victor's unwavering support, he was ready to rebuild his life, one step at a time. With Victor by his side, Ethan began piecing together a new life. The temporary housing provided through the charity program was modest, a small studio apartment with peeling wallpaper and creaky floors. But to Ethan, it felt like a palace compared to the streets. For the first time in months, he had a roof over his head, a bed to sleep in, and walls that shielded him from the harsh realities outside. At the cafe where he worked, Ethan quickly earned a reputation for his work ethic and positive attitude. Though his job mostly involved washing dishes and cleaning tables, he approached each task with gratitude, knowing it was a stepping stone toward something greater. The owner, a kind woman named Mrs. Patel, noticed his dedication and offered him additional hours whenever possible. "You're going places, Ethan," she told him one evening as they closed up shop. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Beyond work, Ethan threw himself into volunteering at the same shelters and clinics that had helped him during his darkest days. He remembered the kindness strangers had shown him, the warm meals, the encouraging words, and vowed to pay it forward. Whether it was serving food, organizing clothing drives, or simply sitting with someone who needed to talk, Ethan poured his heart into helping others. Victor remained a constant presence in his life, offering guidance and support whenever needed. Their friendship deepened as they shared stories of their pasts, dreams for the future, and reflections on the lessons they'd learned along the way. One evening, as they sat together in Ethan's tiny apartment sharing a pot of tea, Victor handed him an envelope. "What's this?" Ethan asked, opening it cautiously. "It's a list of community programs I've been working on," Victor explained. "Job training workshops, mentorship opportunities, resources for people getting back on their feet. I want you to consider applying for some of them. You're ready to take the next step." Ethan scanned the list, his heart swelling with gratitude. Among the programs was a free certification course for aspiring social workers, a path that aligned perfectly with his desire to help others. With Victor's encouragement, he enrolled immediately, balancing his coursework with his shifts at the cafe. As weeks turned into months, Ethan's confidence grew. He excelled in his classes, earning praise from instructors and peers alike. His professors often remarked on his unique perspective, shaped by his experiences on the streets. "You have a gift for understanding people," one of them said after class one day. "That's rare and incredibly valuable." Meanwhile, Ethan continued mentoring those still struggling with homelessness. He organized weekly sessions at the shelter, sharing practical advice and emotional support. Many attendees saw themselves in him, a reminder that no matter how dire things seemed, change was possible. One chilly winter evening, as Ethan stood outside the shelter handing out blankets, he spotted a young man huddled in the corner. The sight tugged at his heartstrings. It was like looking into a mirror of his former self. Approaching cautiously, he introduced himself and offered the blanket. "I know what it's like out here," he said gently. "But there's hope. People care about you more than you think." The young man hesitated before accepting the blanket, tears welling up in his eyes. In that moment, Ethan realized how far he'd come, not just in rebuilding his own life but in becoming someone others could lean on. Though challenges still arose, long hours juggling work and school, moments of self-doubt, Ethan faced them with resilience. Victor's faith in him never wavered, and neither did his own determination to honor the second chance he'd been given. By the end of the year, Ethan graduated from the certification program, earning top marks and securing a position as a case manager at a local nonprofit. Standing on stage during the graduation ceremony, he locked eyes with Victor sitting proudly in the audience. Their unspoken bond spoke volumes. Two lives transformed by kindness, perseverance, and the belief that everyone deserves a chance to start anew. Little did Ethan know, his journey was far from over. But with each step forward, he carried the lessons Victor had taught him, and the promise of inspiring others to do the same. Years passed, and Ethan transformed from a struggling young man into a beacon of hope for his community. As a dedicated social worker, he poured his energy into helping others escape the cycle of homelessness, a mission inspired by his own journey and Victor's unwavering belief in him. The nonprofit where he worked flourished under his leadership, expanding its programs to include job training, mental health support, and affordable housing initiatives. Ethan never forgot the lessons he'd learned on the streets or the kindness that had saved him. He often visited shelters and soup kitchens, not as a professional but as someone who understood what it meant to be invisible. His presence alone brought comfort to those who felt forgotten, and his stories of resilience gave them something to hold on to, hope. One of Ethan's proudest accomplishments was founding a mentorship program called Second Chances. Modeled after the guidance Victor had given him, the program paired individuals experiencing homelessness with mentors who could offer practical advice, emotional support, and encouragement. Many participants went on to secure stable jobs, find permanent housing, and rebuild their lives. Proof that even the smallest acts of compassion could create monumental change. Though busy with his work, Ethan made time to visit Victor regularly. Now elderly and frail, Victor lived in a quiet retirement home surrounded by books and memories. Their conversations remained as meaningful as ever, filled with reflections on life, gratitude, and the ripple effects of kindness. One sunny afternoon, as they sat together in the garden, Victor turned to Ethan with a knowing smile. "You've done incredible things," he said softly. "But none of it would have happened if you hadn't chosen to give that sandwich away." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "And none of it would have happened without you believing in me. You gave me more than shelter or food. You gave me purpose." Victor's eyes softened. "We saved each other, didn't we?" Ethan nodded, emotion swelling in his chest. In that moment, he realized their bond transcended mentorship or friendship. It was a partnership forged through shared struggles and mutual redemption. Together, they had proven that no matter how broken someone might feel, there was always a way forward. As Ethan left the retirement home that day, he paused outside the gates, looking back at the building bathed in golden sunlight. He thought about all the lives they'd touched, the countless people who now had roofs over their heads, bellies full of food, and hearts brimming with hope. It wasn't just his legacy or Victor's. It belonged to everyone who chose to believe in second chances. Inspired, Ethan returned to work the next day with renewed determination. He knew the fight against homelessness wouldn't end anytime soon, but as long as there were people willing to care, the battle could be won, one life at a time. Years later, Ethan stood on the steps of a newly opened community center named Victor's Haven, dedicated to helping those experiencing homelessness. The building buzzed with activity. Families touring temporary housing units, children laughing in the playroom, and volunteers preparing meals in the kitchen. It was everything Ethan had dreamed of and more. As he gazed out at the crowd gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, his eyes met Victor's from across the courtyard. Now confined to a wheelchair, Victor raised a frail hand in acknowledgement, pride evident in his weathered smile. Ethan walked over and knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "This is your legacy too," Ethan said softly. "None of this would have been possible without you." Victor shook his head gently. "No, Ethan, this is yours. I only reminded you of what was already inside you. The strength to rise, the courage to care, and the heart to give back." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he squeezed Victor's hand. "Then let's call it ours." The moment lingered, a testament to the bond they'd shared. A bond born of kindness, sacrifice, and redemption. As Ethan returned to the podium to address the crowd, he reflected on how far they'd come. One act of generosity, a sandwich given to a stranger, had sparked a chain reaction that transformed not just 2 lives but countless others. Ethan ended his speech with a simple yet powerful message. We all have the power to change someone's life. Whether it's a meal, a kind word, or a second chance, no act of compassion is ever wasted. Together, we can build a world where everyone has hope and a place to call home. As the sun set behind the city skyline, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. He knew their work wasn't done, but with love, determination, and faith in humanity, anything was possible.